Farming system is the foundation for players to experience the joys and challenges of managing a virtual farm. The farming system will be the central element that intertwines with the other aspects of game, such as building relationships, quest system, player upgrades, and in-game activities. All of this undoubtedly will create an immersive gaming experience. Welcome to Sky Harvest. I am Hamza and this is the devlog for the long-awaited farming system. So guys, it took me 4 days to implement this system, and in this devlog I will be breaking down each day one by one. So just sit back and relax, as this is going to be a very cozy video showing how farming system was implemented. First thing I did was adding a basic cube with a greenish material, which will be just a placeholder for the floating island. After this, I added a separate virtual camera for the farm, which is going to be a top-down camera. Also, I wanted player to have full control over the mouse cursor, which will be used for farming, and for that reason, rotation of this virtual camera needs to stay locked in place. For this camera system, I have taken inspiration from the amazing Fae Farm game, which has similar camera perspective. Since this is going to be a tile-based farming system, a visual grid was much needed. I began by making a simple grid inside Photoshop, then I exported that grid inside Unity and placed it over the farm. I then made sure that this grid is only visible while player has enabled the farming mode, which is right now by pressing the C key from the keyboard. Next thing was to make a tile select graphics inside Photoshop. Then I moved it to Unity and placed it inside the farm grid. Along with this, I made a separate grid helper script which will spawn this single grid over the whole farm so that I don't have to do it manually one by one. And my farming system was looking good already. After this, I gave the player his first tool, which is a hoe, which will be used in the very first step of farming, that is, tilling the soil. Speaking of which, I also added the soil tile under the grid, which will be enabled when player uses the hoe. While playtesting, everything was looking perfect until this happened. Well, I have to limit the reach of this hoe. Also guys, while fixing this issue, I came across another issue, which was this. I don't know what to call this, but I do know how to fix it. Day 2, I started by fixing the first issue, which was to limit the reach of the hoe. For that, I made a check to see the player's position is on which grid. It was then very easy to find nearby grids which were connected to it. These red lines display the grids that player can interact with at a given time. So, every time player uses a tool, I simply check that is this the grid that player can interact with or not. If it is, then only the tool is used. For the second issue, I created a boolean isUsingTool, which is locking the current grid while player is using the tool and thus restricting the player to select any other grid while using a tool. And that's how I fixed both these issues, and hoe tool was complete for my farming system. Now, the next step in farming is to add the seeds to your soil. Therefore, I began placing seeds and created this seed tile. Also, while we are at it, I also added a simple script which will ensure that every seed will have a random rotation to add a subtle variation. Next step was to add a sack of seeds which will be enabled when player equips a seed packet. And this is how it looks inside the game. After this, I binded all of it together, and this is how everything looks like in action. I was very happy with how the overall farming system is turning out to be so far. On day 3, I added watering can for player to water the seeds, for which I added a watering can mesh inside the player's hand along with the rest of the tools. After this, I added a wet soil tile which will turn on when we water the seeds, and a nice watering animation inside Zacarias animator controller. And this is how it looks when we water these amazing tomato seeds. Now it was time to start adding crops which will be harvested. And as you can see, the very first crop I added was the tomato plant, because I absolutely love tomatoes. What about you guys? Do you like eating tomatoes? In the real world, not all crops harvest same. So to simulate this, I added a quality parameter. To get best quality, player has to not only water the soil properly, but there will also be option for adding fertilizers and compost, just like what a real farmer has to do. Here is an example to show harvest produce based on poor, medium and best quality. On day 4, I started replacing placeholder with some nice graphics such as this cute floating island asset, which is, I don't know why, but freely available on the asset store. I will link it down in the description. Just replacing this with what we had makes the game looks really cozy and polished. But honestly, it still looks very empty. So it was time to remove this emptiness and beautify this island. For that, I used the amazing Polybrush tool. It really speeded up my progress and I was able to place hundreds of items in just a few minutes, which would have otherwise took me days if placed manually. Now, the last remaining thing before I can really call this complete was the addition of a few more floating islands flying in the sky. These will be having awesome exploration items that I have planned for future, and I don't want to disclose them right now. But of course, I will be telling more about it in the future devlogs. So please stay tuned and subscribe to this channel to never miss an update. Now, this is the part where I will showcase you the beautiful farming system of the sky harvest happening in the sky in real time on the floating islands. Thank you so much for watching this devlog. Sky Harvest is out on Steam for you to wishlist now. Please consider subscribing and liking this video, as it really helps me to grow this channel and ensure that I will continue working on this game. Also, if you guys would like to share any feedback, please comment it down below. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.